Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
Statistically speaking, the people who care the most about the quality of their work are often the exact same people who are most likely to sabotage it.
Yeah, which is completely wild when you think about it.
Right. It's this massive paradox. I mean, it drives managers crazy, it ruins perfectly good art, and it stalls, countless careers.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we typically view this intense focus on quality as a virtue, right? Like, we call it having high standards.
We plot it.
Exactly. But today, we're doing a deep dive into a deeply counterintuitive argument, one that suggests that our obsession with getting things exactly right is actually the ultimate form of professional and creative cowardice.
What's fascinating here is how this completely flips the script on how we, evaluate competence.
Yeah.
Because when you start analyzing the underlying mechanics of extreme perfectionism, you realize it's rarely about the pursuit of excellence.
No.
It is almost entirely an avoidance strategy.
And that is the exact premise of the singular, highly focused source material we are dismantling today. It's an excerpt titled The Perfectionist's Shield.
Right.
Now, it's an incredibly dense text, but the core argument, our mission for today, boils down to this. High standards are often just a mask for the fear of being seen.
Yep. That fear of being seen is the core of it.
And the text argues that perfectionists subconsciously engineer situations where their work is never truly finished, or, where it falls short for external reasons, specifically to generate an excuse.
An excuse that acts as a psychological buffer.
Yes, to protect their ego from the sting of real substantive criticism.
Which, is a massive paradigm shift from our cultural programming, right? Because society actively rewards the appearance of perfectionism.
100%. It's the classic cliche answer in a job interview, isn't it? When they asked for your biggest weakness.
Exactly. You sit there and say, I'm a perfectionist. I just care too much.
Right. I work too hard.
And we've legitimized that.
Right.
We treat it as this relentless commitment to the craft. But if we accept the premise of this text, perfectionism isn't about reaching the top of the mountain at all.
What is it about then?
It's about hiding in the cave so no one can measure how well you climb.
Oh, wow. Hiding in the cave. I love that. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the actual mechanics of how that hiding works, starting with this concept of the mask.
Yeah, the mask is where it all starts.
Because the text explicitly argues that high standards are deployed to cover up the fear of being seen. And I think we need to define what being seen means here.
Right, because in adult, professional, or creative context, being seen doesn't mean standing on a literal stage in front of an audience.
No, not at all. It means extreme vulnerability. It means producing something, putting it out into the world, and basically tacitly saying, this represents the absolute limit of my current abilities.
Which is terrifying for a lot of people. It's a difference between potential and reality,
Okay, say more about that. Potential versus reality.
Well, when you hold your work back under the guise of high standards, right, you preserve the illusion of your infinite potential.
Ah, I see.
You get to exist in this nice, safe, theoretical space. Like, your unfinished novel is a masterpiece, or your unlaunched business strategy is flawless.
Right, because no one has read it or tested it yet.
Exactly. It hasn't been tested by reality.
Right.
But the moment you ship it, the moment you are actually seen, the wave function collapses.
You are no longer theoretical.
Right. You are actual. And the actual is always invariably flawed.
That makes me think about the psychological models of motivation. Like, in behavioral psychology, there's a massive difference between the need for achievement and the fear of failure.
Oh, for sure. And they look identical from the outside.
Completely identical. You could have two people both working late at the office, obsessing over the exact same spreadsheet. But the first one is driven by the need for achievement. They're trying to solve a puzzle. They're engaged. The work is pulling them forward.
Yeah, they're in flow.
Right. But the other one, they're driven by the fear of failure. They are absolutely terrified of making a mistake that will expose them to judgment.
And that second person is the one wearing the mask.
Exactly.
Because the mask of high standards is incredibly effective.
Yeah.
It's socially unassailable.
Yeah, you can't argue with it.
Right. If you go to your team and say, hey, I'm terrified of being judged, you invite pity. Or, people start questioning your competence.
Oh, definitely.
But if you walk in and say, I refuse to compromise on the quality of this deliverable, you immediately shut down any inquiry.
And you elevate your own status in the process.
You do. You've basically taken an acute anxiety response and dressed it up in a tuxedo.
Dressed it in a tuxedo. That is such a good way to put it. I was trying to conceptualize how this operates on a systemic level for people, like in their daily workflow.
Yeah.
It's a lot like wearing a flashy superhero cape, right?
Okay, I'm tracking.
You put on this cape of high standards, and it draws all this attention to how much you care. Like, look how dedicated I am.
All right, look at my cape.
But the actual function of the cape, it's doubling as an invisibility cloak. You're wrapping it around yourself to hide your true vulnerable self from the world.
That is a highly accurate metaphor. The cloak hides you from the perceived threat.
Yeah. It's like a computer running a really aggressive background antivirus scan. The intention is protection. The system is scanning for threats, looking for vulnerabilities, trying to make sure absolutely nothing malicious gets through.
But the scan is so obsessive.
That it eats up 99% of the CPU's processing power.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
The system looks incredibly busy. The fans are whirring loudly. But if you try to actually open a word processor and, write something, the whole machine freezes. The protective mechanism destroys the functional capacity.
Right. The cognitive load required to anticipate every single possible criticism, to find every microscopic flaw before anyone else can arrive. It leaves virtually no bandwidth for actual creativity or execution.
None at all.
The perfectionist isn't iterating. They are troubleshooting a threat that hasn't even materialized yet.
But wait, let me push back on this a little, or at least introduce a competing theory.
Yeah.
Because surely some people just like doing good work.
Right. Absolutely.
Like, we can't pathologize all forms of quality control. Look at someone like Jiro Ono, the famous sushi chef.
Yeah.
Or a master watchmaker.
Right, or an aerospace engineer.
Exactly, an engineer where a miscalculation literally costs lives. They operate with standards that seem completely insane to the average person. So at what point does a genuinely high standard curdle into this fear-based mask the text is talking about?
That is a crucial distinction. And the dividing line really comes down to the internal emotional reality of the person doing the work.
Okay, so how do we measure that?
Well, we can look at this through the lens of Carol Dweck's research on mindsets. I'm sure you're familiar with her work.
Oh yeah, growth versus fixed mindset.
Precisely. The master craftspeople you just mentioned, the sushi chefs, the elite engineers, they typically operate with a profound growth mindset. Their high standards are intrinsically linked to the material itself. It's about the joy of the craft and the joy of solving the problem.
Okay.
So when they find a flaw, they view it as information. It's just data that tells them how to improve the next iteration.
So a flaw isn't a threat to their actual identity.
Exactly. It's just a gear that needs fixing. But the perfectionist, the person hiding behind the mask, they operate almost exclusively in a fixed mindset.
Where abilities are static.
Right. In a fixed mindset, you're either smart or you aren't.
Wow.
You're talented or you aren't.
Wow, okay.
Therefore, every single project isn't a process of iteration. It is a definitive high-stakes referendum on your innate worth as a human being.
Man, that sounds exhausting.
It is. The master watchmaker fixes a gear because they love the watch. The perfectionist fixes the gear because they believe a broken watch proves they are fundamentally fraudulent.
That brings such a fascinating dimension to the idea of the shield, which is actually the next major concept the text introduces.
Yes, the shield.
It specifically uses the phrase, and I'm quoting here, perfectionism is just a shield against being judged.
Which is such evocative language.
It really is. If your entire sense of self-worth is on the line every time you send an email or, pitch a project, it completely warps your perception of the environment.
It creates a state of perpetual hypervigilance. Think about the imagery of a shield. A shield is a tool of war.
Right.
You carry it because you expect an incoming attack. You don't bring a shield to a collaborative workshop. You bring it to a battlefield.
Which means the perfectionist fundamentally misunderstands the nature of their audience.
Completely.
They look at their manager or their clients or their listeners, and they don't see collaborators. They don't even see neutral observers.
No, they see a hostile force. They perceive judgment as a literal weapon.
And this has to have profound neurobiological implications.
Right? Oh, it does. When you view your environment as inherently hostile, your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, is just constantly activated.
It's just pinging nonstop.
Pinging nonstop. You are operating in a low-grade fight-or-flight state all day long. Your brain is literally processing the prospect of peer review with the exact same neurochemical urgency as physical danger.
That explains so much about corporate environments.
How so?
I mean, I see this constantly. Think about the classic example of the 100-slide PowerPoint deck for a 15-minute meeting.
Oh, yes, the dreaded mega deck.
Right. The presenter spends like 80 hours building out these massive appendices, secondary charts, entirely irrelevant historical data.
And they tell themselves they're just being thorough.
Exactly. They say, I have high standards. But structurally, if you really look at what they're doing, they aren't trying to communicate an idea clearly. They are building a psychological bunker.
That's spot on.
They are adding layers and layers of data purely to ensure that no one in that boardroom can ask a question they can't immediately answer. They are fortifying a bunker, not sharing information.
Precisely. They are fortifying their position rather than advancing the objective of the meeting. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the irony of the 100-slide deck is that it usually just confuses the audience.
Oh, always. It's overwhelming.
Which leads to more questions. And those extra questions only validate the perfectionist's underlying belief that the audience is hostile and they needed the giant shield in the first place.
It's a total self-fulfilling prophecy of alienation.
It really is.
So I want to ask you, the listener, right now, look at your own life, look at your projects. Where are you carrying a heavy shield when you actually just need to open a door?
That's a great question to reflect on, because holding up a bunker-grade shield is physically and mentally exhausting.
You can't maintain that defensive posture indefinitely.
No, you can't. Eventually, the deadline hits,
Yeah.
or the budget runs out, or the client just demands the deliverable.
You have to lower the shield.
You have to lower it. And because it's a human endeavor, the work is never flawlessly perfect.
Yeah.
And the text reveals what happens next. When this inevitable shortfall happens, the perfectionist has a backup contingency plan already in place. The excuse.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the text explicitly states, quote, if it's not perfect, you have an excuse.
Yep.
On its surface, that sounds completely illogical, like a paradox. We assume people demanding perfection desperately want to finish perfectly.
That's the logical assumption.
But the text argues that not reaching perfection is actually the secret goal because it yields this magical excuse.
This is where we cross from standard anxiety into the deeply fascinating territory of self-handicapping.
Okay, self-handicapping. Let's break down the mechanics of that because it is wild how the brain justifies this.
It really is. Self-handicapping is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. It's basically where people intentionally create obstacles and excuses for themselves.
Right.
So that if they do poorly on a task, they can avoid blaming their own lack of innate ability.
They shift the blame.
Exactly. The foundational study on this is by Burgess and Jones from 1978. It's a classic. They gave subjects a test and told them they did brilliantly. But the catch was, the test was actually unsolvable.
Wait, really? So the subjects just guessed?
Yeah, they just guessed, so they felt like imposters who had just gotten lucky.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then, the researchers offered them a choice of 2 drugs before taking a second test. One drug supposedly enhanced performance, and the other drug inhibited performance.
Okay.
And the people who felt like imposters, the ones who were told they succeeded on an unsolvable test, overwhelmingly chose the performance-inhibiting drug.
Which sounds completely insane until you look at the math the ego is doing in the background.
Exactly. The ego runs a very quick calculation and says, if I take the enhancing drug and I still fail this second test, it proves my first success was a total fluke and I am actually incompetent.
Which is an identity-destroying realization.
Right. But if I take the inhibiting drug and I fail, I have an ironclad excuse. I can say, it was the drug's fault, not mine. And by doing that, I preserve my belief in my own underlying genius.
So the perfectionist is doing the exact same thing. But instead of a pill, their performance inhibitor is the impossibly high standard itself.
That is exactly what they're doing. By setting a standard that is mathematically impossible to meet, given, the constraints of reality like time, resources, human error, they guarantee they will fall short.
And when they fall short, they can blame the unrealistic standard, or they blame the lack of time, rather than their own inherent abilities.
There are 2 main types of self-handicapping at play here, actually. Behavioral and claimed.
Okay, what's the difference?
Behavioral self-handicapping is active self-sabotage. Think of a startup founder who intentionally scales their operations wildly out of proportion before securing any funding.
Oh, I've seen that.
Right. They tell everyone they're just being ambitious. But subconsciously, they are creating so much chaos that when the company inevitably collapses, they can blame the sheer complexity of the market.
Instead of their own poor leadership skills.
Exactly. That's behavioral.
And claimed self-handicapping.
That's the narrative you build around the failure.
Oh, I have a perfect example for this one. The college student pulling the all-nighter.
Yes, the classic example.
We've all seen this person, right? The student spends 3 weeks talking about how their thesis is going to revolutionize sociology.
They're establishing the high standards mask.
Precisely. They're telling everyone they're a genius. But then they wait until 10:00 p.m. the night before it's due to actually start writing.
Which is the behavioral self-handicap, the active sabotage.
Right. And then comes the claimed self-handicap when they inevitably get the grade back. If they get a C on the paper, the ego is perfectly protected. The narrative they tell themselves and everyone else is, well, obviously I got a C, I wrote it in 8 hours. If I had had a whole month, it would have been an A+.
It's brilliant.
It is. They completely insulate themselves from finding out if their absolute best, fully rested, month-long effort is actually only worth a C.
Because they prioritize the fantasy of their unfulfilled potential over the reality of their current limitations.
So, wait, what does this all mean then? Are we secretly sabotaging ourselves on purpose just to keep this excuse in our back pocket?
Subconsciously, yes.
Yeah.
That is the subconscious genius, and honestly the tragedy of the perfectionist field. The excuse is a built-in insurance policy against ever being truly tested.
Wow.
And you see professionals doing this all the time by constantly taking on too many projects.
Oh, the I'm too busy badge of honor.
Right. By perpetually operating beyond their capacity, they ensure that no single project ever receives their full focus.
I see where this is going.
So if any project receives lukewarm feedback, the built-in excuse is right there. I was spread too thin.
The lack of focus is actually a defensive strategy.
Exactly. It prevents any one piece of work from being a true, accurate measure of their capability.
This perfectly transitions into the final and arguably the most crucial argument from the source text.
The sting.
Yeah. Why go through this elaborate, exhausting psychological theater? Why run the background antivirus scan until the computer crashes? Why build the bunker? Why engineer the excuse? The text says it all exists for one specific reason.
To protect the ego from the sting of real criticism.
Yes. And the operative word there is real, which implies something fascinating.
If the mechanism is designed to repel real criticism, we have to acknowledge that there is fake criticism.
And that perfectionists actually tolerate a massive amount of it.
Oh, they invite it.
Right.
Right.
It's the humble brag of the corporate world. Fake criticism is feedback that secretly reinforces the mask. It's when a manager says, your biggest problem is that you are just too detail-oriented.
You just care too much about the project.
Exactly. You need to learn how to turn it off. You work too hard.
The perfectionist hears that, and their ego is deeply validated
They love it.
because it strokes the very defense mechanism they are using to hide. It sounds like an admonishment, but it functions as a total endorsement. It confirms that the mask is working.
That everyone sees the cape.
Exactly. But real criticism is a completely different animal.
Real criticism pierces the shield.
It does. Real criticism doesn't attack the effort. It attacks the efficacy.
It sounds like. The premise of this argument is fundamentally flawed. Or the user interface on this app is completely unintuitive, or honestly just, this isn't very good.
And for someone operating in that fixed mindset we discussed earlier, where every piece of output is directly tied to their inherent human worth, real criticism isn't just feedback on a project.
What is it to them?
It is perceived as a literal existential threat.
Really? Like life or death?
The neurobiology of social rejection backs this up completely.
Yeah.
There are studies using fMRI machines, specifically the work by Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA.
Okay, what did she find?
She showed that the pain of social rejection activates the exact same neural circuitry as physical pain, specifically the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex.
Wait, so the brain literally can't tell the difference between being told your work is bad and getting punched in the arm?
Essentially, yes. When the text uses the word sting, it's not being poetic. The brain literally registers a harsh critique of our work as physical injury.
That is mind-blowing.
So for the perfectionist, receiving real criticism feels like touching a hot stove. And, the rational response to touching a hot stove is to build mechanisms to ensure you never, ever touch it again.
Right, you avoid the stove at all costs. But here is the tragedy of that. We treat real criticism like a bee sting when we have an allergy. We think it's going to destroy us.
Yes.
So we avoid the garden entirely. We stay inside, holding our massive shield, clutching our excuses, safe, but completely alone.
And completely stagnant.
Because touching a hot stove only damages tissue. But receiving real criticism is actually the only mechanism by which human beings grow.
This raises an important question, right?
Yeah.
What is the cost of never feeling that sting?
It's huge.
If you successfully insulate yourself from the sting of real criticism, you also successfully insulate yourself from the truth. You isolate yourself from the feedback loops that are necessary for mastery.
Like deliberate practice.
Exactly. Think about the concept of deliberate practice, championed by Anders Ericsson. Deliberate practice requires constant, immediate, and often deeply uncomfortable feedback.
You have to play the wrong note on the piano.
Yes. You have to play the wrong note, hear that it's wrong, and adjust your fingers.
But if you never play the note because you're terrified, it might be out of tune.
Or if you play it, but then blame the acoustics of the room when it sounds bad.
You never learn how to correct your finger placement.
You stagnate. You become trapped in a self-constructed echo chamber where the only voice is your own anxiety telling you that the world is too dangerous to engage with, honestly.
The perfectionist thinks they are maintaining a standard of excellence, but in reality, they are enforcing a standard of stagnation.
They are protecting an ego that is so fragile it cannot withstand the friction of the real world.
It is the ultimate irony, isn't it?
It really is.
In an attempt to avoid looking foolish or incompetent, the perfectionist guarantees that they will never actually reach their full potential. They trade the possibility of greatness for the certainty of an excuse.
And honestly, the energy cost of all this is astronomical. Think about the cognitive overhead we've discussed today.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
Scanning for threats, building the bunker, engineering the excuse, managing the public narrative. It takes a massive amount of intelligence and creativity to maintain a perfectionist's shield.
So much wasted energy. Imagine if all of that sheer raw processing power, that 99% of the CPU being used by the anxiety antivirus, was actually directed toward the work itself.
It would be incredible.
Imagine if the goal shifted from, I must not be judged negatively, to, I want to see what happens when I put this into the world. Let's quickly synthesize the logical progression of what this text has revealed today. We started by ripping off the mask of high standards, right? To expose the intense fear of vulnerability underneath.
We recognize that perfectionism is often a smokescreen for the terror of being seen as merely adequate.
And from there, we examined the hostile worldview required to carry the perfectionist's shield, realizing that this hypervigilance destroys our ability to collaborate.
We explored the paradoxical math of the excuse, self-handicapping, where we intentionally set impossible goals to guarantee a failure we can blame on circumstances.
And finally, we isolated the root cause. An ego so fragile and so reliant on a fixed mindset that it processes substantive feedback as actual physical pain. The perfectionist builds a labyrinth to avoid the temporary sting of real criticism. So, as we conclude this deep dive, I want you to consider a specific dilemma in your own life right now. Think about a project on your to-do list that is stalled, or a piece of art sitting in a drawer, or a difficult conversation you keep endlessly revising in your head. Are you genuinely iterating toward mastery, or are you running out the clock to manufacture an excuse?
And as you analyze your own motives there, consider this final implication of the text. The perfectionist builds this massive shield because they view the outside world as a harsh, unforgiving judge. But if you are the one setting the impossible standards, and you are the one engineering the failure, and you are the one manufacturing the excuses, then the outside world isn't the hostile force.
Wow.
The harshest judge, the one you've been hiding from this entire time, is simply yourself. What beautiful, flawed thing could you bring into the world tomorrow if you decided you simply didn't mind the sting anymore? Come on.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.